Welcome back to this week's edition of the Matt Return. I'm Andrew Deal.
I'm AJ Piazza.
And I'm Evan Smith.
And this week we will be talking about the Journeyman's Duel from a couple weeks ago, recapping the Michigan State duel from last weekend, going over the Southern Scuffle where a bunch of Penn State backups dominated, and previewing the Nebraska match this weekend. So, Evan, going into the Journeyman duels, there was a lot of hyped-up matchups, and they kind of lived up to the hype. What really stood out to you from those?
Yep, I was here before the break, hyping up Keegan O'Toole versus Levi Haynes. We knew it was going to be a tough one for Levi. Honestly, he held in more than I thought he would. They ended up no scoring throughout the first period, and then I think, if I remember correctly, they each only got their stand-up points from breaking the riding time. And then they go the extra time, and that was one of, if not the most entertaining extra times that I've seen since truly focusing in on wrestling. And Keegan O'Toole, I think it was in the final seconds, just barely snuck over Levi. And even then, it was controversial. Penn State threw the challenge brick. So if that's the national championship match, there's a lot to look forward to there. And it looks like those two are in a class of their own. And Levi Haynes was hanging in there with Keegan O'Toole. It's not like there was any semblance of Keegan O'Toole is clearly better. So that's a great sign for Levi in his new weight class.
Yeah, I'm going to have to say Braden Davis versus Nasir Bailey. That was a really close matchup as well. It ended only 1-0 with Davis getting an escape point. And it was very impressive because Davis came off that loss from Crookham, who was number 1 at 133. And he's really bounced back from then. And beating Nasir Bailey was one of those steps that he's taken to get back into the top 5. So that was the match that really impressed me at the Journeyman Duels.
Yeah, so two big-time wins, or two big-time matchups, that is. And Levi Haynes showing that he really can hang around in that additional weight class, that he jumped 2 weight classes and was able to hang around with the top guy at 174. Now into Michigan State. It was pretty dominant, I guess you could say. What really stood out to you guys about the dominance from the Penn State wrestlers?
I mean, anytime you see 6 pinfalls on top of, if I remember, only one match really went to decision. That wasn't a tech fall. Even then, I think it was a major decision. Just complete dominance inside the conference. I came in seeing Michigan State thinking it's going to be hopefully a tougher matchup than we've seen so far. It ended up not being that at all. Not a single ranked opponent against a Penn State Nittany Lions, so it's nothing out of the ordinary. Probably should have been expected, but when you perform at that level, there's nothing to complain about.
Yeah, Michigan State is one of the weaker teams in the Big Ten in wrestling, and this was kind of like any other Penn State match we've really seen so far. A shutout win, a lot of pinfalls, and Penn State really just dominated in each weight class. But Luke Lilladall's performance really stood out to me with that 19-2 tech fall. He's just been on a complete tear this whole season and keeps showing why he could be one of the top 5 wrestlers in his weight class.
Yeah, for me, the one that really stood out was a match I didn't even get to see because I was watching it on Big Ten Network. And the Michigan duel that was airing before went slightly long. They come in, oh, hey, Greg Kirkfleet already pinned him. It took 50 seconds.
Yeah, so a big statement right at the beginning there from Kirkfleet. And I just saw that Nittany Lions did not allow a single takedown in that duel. So pure dominance from the beginning, which I guess was Kirkfleet at heavyweight, all the way back to 197 with Josh Barr. And it was kind of expected with it being Michigan State. They're 2-2 now on the season, where Penn State is 7-0. But to still dominate against a conference opponent like that is very impressive. And
why did they start with Kirkfleet? Does anyone know why they went out of weight class order technically? Was there a reason for that?
I know for wrestling, a lot of times they'll push the most hyped up, entertaining match to the end. I guess they thought Josh Barr would somehow be the closest. But shockingly, the most, I guess you could say, entertaining match was Carter Strachey's match. Because he was in control the entire time, had Boucher on the ground. But for a solid period and almost a half, he couldn't secure a pinfall. Boucher kept himself on the ground, and it was just kind of intriguing to watch how he was able to avoid the pinfall until I think it was halfway through the second. He secured it at the 5:48 mark. Watching So Carter struggled a little bit, not in the form of losing, but in the form of finishing the match.
Yeah, he was still able to get the fall, but out of everybody except for, out of all the falls, he secured it the latest. Going back to your question, I think one of the teams gets to choose. I'm not entirely sure about that breakdown, but I'm pretty sure a team gets to choose where you start. Most often they start at 125, but you'll have the occasional time where they start at a different weight, even heavyweight. So now we're going to go to the Southern Scuffle, is where the Penn State backups kind of got a little bit of time wrestling, and they dominated as well. It was really impressive to see what they did in the Southern Scuffle and in the Edinburgh Open. Out of these younger wrestlers, what wrestler really stood out to you guys?
Connor Pierce is my pick at 149. He came in second place, which is a solid finish, and he actually had a ranked win in decision against number 13 Willie McDougald from Oklahoma, and it was really impressive to see a Penn State considered backup really just beat someone who's a legit top 15 wrestler in their weight class. So I think he had the best performance in my opinion. I know there were some winners, but yeah, Connor Pierce really stood out to me at 149.
Yep, I'll save the last two winners for you, Andrew, but I got to shout out Zach Ryder. How lucky is Penn State that their backup behind arguably the best wrestler in the entire country is the Big Ten Freshman of the Week. Goes in there, 4 straight wins, including 2 overranked opponents. He pinned number 20. Just overall, Zach Ryder's making a name for himself, and he's not even going to start until next year.
Yeah, so both those guys, 2 young guys, Connor Pierce, a sophomore, Zach Ryder, a true freshman. I'm going to go to the other 2 true freshmen, the twin brothers, Connor Mirasola and Cole Mirasola, both won in their weight classes. Connor at 197 defeated number 30 Patrick Brophy from the Citadel, and he just looked pure dominance. He had a pin, 2 techs, and a major. So when you're able to do that as a true freshman, that's big for the future of this team. And then over to his brother at heavyweight, he also went undefeated, had a 21-6 tech fall against Connor Barkett, who's number 29 in the country, and another just pure dominance, gave up very little scoring, and in the final he ruled to a 9-0 major decision. So a lot of dominance from these younger wrestlers and overall backups as well. In the Edinburgh Open, Kale Nasdeo, another freshman, went 3-0 at 141, and he had a win against a non-collegiate wrestler. I don't really know how that ends up happening, how that's even fair as well, considering he's getting the training from the best program in the country, and then he has to fight or wrestle a non-collegiate guy. That's something that stood out, but overall dominance from these young guys.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think this really shows the depth that Penn State has and why they are beating teams like Michigan State 55-0. It's crazy how all these young guys that are considered backups really are winning against ranked and proven wrestlers right now.
Yeah, and it shows that, I mean, all 4 of these guys that won their championship could be a starter in most other places, but instead they're sitting behind some of the top wrestlers in the country and are getting the best training that any wrestler could get. Now we're gonna move it on to the next duel that's coming up, and that is against a ranked Big Ten opponent, and it'll be against number 9 Nebraska, which is taking place Friday night at 9 p.m., a late night start for Penn State. It's in Nebraska, which could cause some difficulties, I would say, but a lot of intriguing matchups throughout this. Anything really stand out to you guys?
Yeah, it's for the first time Penn State's going to see a majority of ranked matchups. I believe 8 out of 10 matches are expected to be ranked competition. We still got to wait until tomorrow night to see officially. The one that I'm really looking forward to is right there at 125. Luke Lilidol faces what I think is his biggest test in Caleb Smith. Right now, he's ranked number 7. He was higher to start the year, kind of fell, but he's coming off a top 10 win in his match against Minnesota, and you got to think that those 3 losses on the year are going to make him bitter coming into a match with this freshman who's getting all of this attention. So you got the straight up skill of Luke Lilidol times, obviously the still, but also maybe some bitterness coming out of Nebraska with Caleb Smith.
Yeah, just before I get into my matchup, Nebraska's coming into this match with an interesting last few matches. They beat Minnesota, but they lost Northern Iowa, so they're clearly looking to get on a bit of a win streak here. But the match I'd have to look at would be at 141, Bo Bartlett versus Brock Hardy. Brock Hardy is, in my opinion, Bartlett's toughest test in duels. I know Bartlett wrestled Mendez in the All-Star Classic earlier, but I think this is really going to prove, to me at least, if Bartlett's taken that next step to be a national championship contender. This is going to be his toughest test of the year. And I think it'll prove to a lot of people if he's legit number 1 at his weight class.
Yeah, I'm going to go one weight class higher from you. I'm going to go 149. Shane Van Ness is number 2 in the country right now. It's kind of his redemption tour right now after his injury-riddled season last year. He was out for most of the season. He's going to take on number 5 Ridge Lovett, who's 9-1, has another year of experience in college. He's a senior right now, and another big test to see if Shane Van Ness is fully back to what we saw in previous years of his dominance. And Ridge Lovett, with that home crowd, could cause some issues, or we could just see Shane Van Ness continue this pure dominance that he has started so far. Now, I think this duel can really show how good this Penn State team is. They're number 1 in the country, obviously. They're coming off a national championship, but you're facing another top 10 team in Nebraska. How big they win is going to be a big test to see how good this team can really be. And we've heard multiple players, multiple wrestlers say that this team might be better than last year's. Do you guys have any thoughts on that so far this season?
I think it's a little tough to tell right now. They haven't really wrestled anyone that's, I'll say, close to their level. And Nebraska is their first legitimate test to that. So I agree with you. I think this match will really tell a lot about how this Nittany Lion team is, especially in those early weight classes. So, yeah, it's going to be an exciting one to watch, though.
Yeah, and on top of that, when you look at Nebraska's roster, a lot of their higher-ranked guys are facing the more question marks in Penn State's lineup. I'm not even call them a question mark, but like Tyler Kasak going against number 5, you said Shane Van Ness, Luke Lilidol. Those are all guys not into the Mitch Messenbrink, Carter Stracci territory where they're not necessarily locked in as these top contenders. This is a good chance for them to show their worth 100%, take out any doubts that people might want to have about this Penn State lineup not having that level of skill.
Yeah, if this ends up being another, if they're able to shut out Nebraska, I think, in my opinion, you could say this team is on track to be better than last year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, like you said, there's some of those, I don't even know if you can call them weaker points, but, I get what you were saying with guys that aren't necessarily certain if they're national championship contenders in the lower weight classes. If they're able to win and win with some dominance, they're putting the rest of the country on notice that this could break even more records than they broke last year. That'll do it for this week's edition of The Matt Return. I'm Andrew Deal.
I'm AJ Piazza.
And I'm Evan Smith.
And we will see you next week for the next episode of The Matt Return.